Hi there. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, I'll take.
Cool. Okay, so I guess I'll just get started with my presentation. Um, my name is Rich Vreeland. I have been working in video games, film, and television, primarily video games, for about 15 years or so, doing music and sound, and released music under the name Disasterpiece. Worked on games like Hyperlight Drifter, Fez, Mini Metro, Mini Motorways, Reigns, and my presentation today is essentially a workshop. Um, the title, the title of the workshop is "Synths Come Alive: A Workshop for Injecting Organic Feeling into Electronic Music." So I had a composer come to me and ask me who liked my work, who asked me like, how do I take synthesizer sounds and make them come alive? Like, how do I make them really organic sounding and expressive? And I thought this would be a great opportunity to sort of share a little bit of how I've gone about doing that in some of my work. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'll get to it. All right. So this is a synthesizer that I've used for a really long time. It's called Massive by Native Instruments. It hasn't really seen much of an update actually in well over 10 years probably, but I've gotten really comfortable using it. And, you know, from my perspective, if it ain't broke, I haven't really seen a need to fix it. So yeah, just in continuing to use the same synth, it kind of just, it's gotten really familiar for me. So let's just make sure that I have some sound here. All right. Just give me 1 second. Let's see. Okay. Can you guys hear that? Hear that before I get started. Let's see. Cool. Okay. Just to be sure, everyone can hear this? Okay, cool. Awesome. Okay, so yeah, so in order to, you know, to make expressive synth sounds, you know, with a lot of synths, you know, they have all sorts of fancy presets and stuff. What I like about this synth is that when you load it up, it's very basic, and you can just kind of get into shaping it into something, something that you want, you know, something custom. And so, you know, out of the box, you know, you might have a very basic sound, and I'll just record a little something that I can start to mess with. So, you know, record a little bit of music and then start to tweak the sound a little bit. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'll start with something very basic, and then later, once I've dialed in something a little interesting, then we can start fleshing it out a little bit. So, you know, for starters, there's a whole lot you can do to a sound like this to start to create a little bit more interest, and make it feel a little bit more alive. You know, for starters, you can sort of spread the sound out. one thing that I like to do a lot is to play with randomness. So in this synth, there's this trigger random control, which you can kind of apply to things. You can apply it to the panning as an example and just start kind of moving stuff around. You can also kind of play with like the envelopes and stuff. You can introduce little bits of randomness into everything, which just kind of like just makes things come alive a little bit, very slowly. You know, variations in like the tone of things. You know, maybe play a little bit with the pitch. So oops, that was me slamming on the keyboard. So you could like, don't want to overdo it, but kind of introduce little bits, stuff like that. Another thing that we could do is like, you know, we could introduce some dynamics into the sound. So depending on like that's just me playing totally, playing the same key at different attack levels, but they're all kind of at the same velocity. If I crank this up on the envelope, and it's gonna get quieter and louder depending on like how, you know, how much I inject into that. And then you can really start to play with that idea, this concept of dynamics and velocity in a lot of the different settings of the sound. So I'm gonna actually delete this and I'll play something a little more dynamic, just to show just to kind of demonstrate this. Okay, so we kind of work with that. It's sounding maybe a little too pitchy, so I'm gonna dial back some of this stuff for now, and I'll crank this up a little bit so you can hear it a little bit better. So what we can do with the velocity stuff, you know, is we can start to like just add a little bit more dynamic variety to the sound in different areas. You know, we can obviously like we can add some velocity to the filter, which will kind of change the brightness. So this will basically just add a little bit of velocity. Then we can kind of get into more, there are lots of little kind of funky things you can do in a synth like this, which I quite like. I'll just kind of like I'll show some little techniques just to start to create more variety between the notes. One is to use a delay on every note with like where you just got a little bit of randomness to the time. I'm gonna make this come through a little quicker. You can get interesting effects actually with reverb when you play with the size a little bit on the fly, like that. So what this is doing, and every time a key is being pressed, it's slightly altering the size of the reverb, and so you get these little sort of fluctuations. We can kind of combine that. We can also like double up on the envelope. This envelope is actually, you know, it's controlling the volume of the sound. We can also apply this to other parameters in the sound. So if we do something like this, you can kind of get like a little bit of reverb coming through, and then it goes away depending on like how, you know, when you play notes and when you don't. There are these sort of modulations you can do too. So we can get into like taking the oscillator and modulating it. Let's play some more stuff. So, you know, another thing that is interesting to explore with trying to make synth sounds more expressive is getting into a lot of cross modulation. And so one way to do that is to have different oscillators that are kind of affecting each other, and then using those to affect the relationships within the sound, whether that's, you know, two different oscillators, which are the modules, these modules on the left that generate, they're the ones that generate the pitch. So if we start messing with sort of cross modulation, we can start to create some sort of like interesting relationships between those sounds, like sort of how those kind of come in and out. So let's take a look at that. So I could do something like, one idea would be to like have two different filters, and to sort of move between them using oscillation. So if I apply an oscillator to the mix and I have two different low pass filters, and maybe these have, you know, maybe these are set up differently. Like maybe this one is more, the cutoff is controlled more with the envelope for the sound, and you know, we add some randomness, maybe a little randomness here. I haven't even listened to this yet, so I don't exactly know what it's going to sound like, but sometimes that's the fun of this process. So then you can sort of play with, like, I mean, obviously when it's really fast, it almost starts to beat, and it starts to become like it almost starts to become a pitch of its own. So that's like one effect. That's kind of funky. But you can also do things like control this with the envelope of the amplitude of the sound. Get some pretty interesting and weird effects going on. Another idea maybe is to, you know, have this change every time a key is pressed. So this restart setting is basically just saying every time you press a key, restart the LFO. And so it's going to regenerate the LFO with a different rate. So what you have is you have this oscillator that's constantly being reset at different rates. And these sort of like cross modulations can just kind of, you know, they can just sort of spice stuff up a little bit. This, you know, what's cool about a synthesizer like this is just that it's all right here in front of you, and you can very quickly kind of get into it and start experimenting with, you know, how things relate to each other, lots of cross modulation, and you can really get some pretty cool sounds going. Let's see, maybe I'll do like a sort of a key part, and then I'll do like a lead part, and we can explore some more sort of ideas. That would be cool. I think what I'll do is I'll make another patch here, and we can start looking at maybe like a lead instrument and see what we can do with that. So we'll start with something really basic, maybe play something in, and then just slowly kind of start to sculpt it a little bit. Let's see. So I'll probably do just a single type sound, a single voice, so that all the pitches are sort of carried together. Maybe I'll add a little bit of glide. Actually, oh yeah, I gotta do that. I gotta set it to monophonic. Ooh, too much. Okay. Okay, that's very, very flat. Not terribly easy to listen to, especially if it was continuing. So that'll be a good sort of example of, you know, starting with something that's pretty rough and then just slowly trying to pick it apart and make it more listenable. So the first and easiest thing that we could do with this is probably to add some velocity to it. Another thing that I might do is I might play with make the sound sort of take longer and shorter to come in and out. You could also add maybe some vibrato that comes in over time. So we could do something like this. So I'm actually, this is a little limited, this one. So I'm actually going to use, an LFO for this. So what I'm going to do is just basically have this amplitude increase. I'm going to use an envelope to increase the amplitude over time. So what I'll do is use another envelope here with a slow attack time. And then over time, this will control the amplitude. Then you take this oscillator and you modulate the pitch with it. So in this sound, we've only got one oscillator going right now, this first one. So I'll have it modulated by, this is about 1/5 of a semitone. So. This is supposed to be happening right away. Let's see. Yeah. Having a bit of an issue with that. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. I'll just go back to this one. So add a little bit of vibrato. Another thing I can do with this is maybe I'll just change the rate a little bit every time just to make it a little more expressive, a little more variety. Okay. Now that we've gotten that, I think adding a filter to this will definitely help with making the sound a little warmer. Just using a straight square wave sound is, it's going to be a bit harsh. Not that can't work. It just depends on what you're going for. So, yeah, let's try something a little softer. So probably bring down the supporting this part, the chord part, just to create more room for the melody. And then so there are some other things you can do with this that's pretty cool. Modulating the filter. There's a FM modulation for the filter, and that'll brighten this up too. We can get into using the envelope again. Okay. Okay, I think this would be a good time to talk a little bit about pitch. So one of the things that I think can add a lot to performances is to play with modulation in general, like I've been talking about, but not just this sort of like what I would call passive modulation, where it's just going and it's just kind of doing what it's doing, but also some active modulation where you're really dialing things in based on the performance. The simplest one to do is pitch. So what I like to do is I'll just do a pitch pass on a melody or something. So I'll just like run through this and maybe try to add some tasteful like pitch bends and that kind of thing. It's pretty easy to just throw down a bunch of pitch modulation all over the place. That's usually what happens the first time I do it. It's just everything has pitch modulation on it suddenly. And so, but I have this process that works, I think, pretty well, which is you just keep passing over it and pulling things out or kind of like carving away at it. So, there might be some modulation in here that's maybe too much, and I might go in and like pull it out. Like there might be some sections here that's just like not really adding anything to the performance to have a pitch bend. Like that one maybe is unnecessary as an example. But yeah, it's also fun to just see how far you can kind of how much you can get away with. and as far as just like bringing some interest to the sound, without kind of going overboard, and just trying to find that pocket. So I'll try to add a little bit of pitch bend to the accompaniment too, and see if see how far we can get. Okay, I think actually this doesn't really need any pitch bend. So this is not a mistake. It's just part of the process. When I'm trying to make something organic, this is sort of in the vein of like maybe how I would have gone about working on Hyperlight Drifter. I'm just trying lots of stuff and it's not all going to work. And I just kind of keep pressing on, keep trying stuff and just keep trying to like get towards something that sounds alive. It's really just like it's an active process of listening and trying different things and just trying to get further away from where you started and closer to something that just has a little bit of a sense of like personality, but also sort of like almost like sentience or something like that. Like so just like start making some more changes around, is this for me, the question might be like, is this too, I don't know, it sounds a little bit like keyboard rock or something. So I'm trying to like pull it out of that a little bit, maybe make it a little bit more, I don't know, maybe a little bit more ambient. So just pulling the attack off the melody can help with that. I might play a little bit with the panning of this sound. Maybe that'll be fun. So one way I could do that is just a simple like on retriggers of this LFO, it's going to change the rate of the panning and that's going to kind of move things around a little bit. So I think this is a pretty good, it's a pretty good coverage of like the actual sound generation aspect of it. Um, a big component of, I mean, you could absolutely do everything just within a synthesizer. There's plenty there to go on. I haven't even really dived too deep into effects and what you can do there within a synthesizer. But my process, I like to use insert effects as part of that to really sort of just add more complexity and variety to the sounds themselves. There are a lot of effects that you can do that you might not find just directly in a synthesizer, but you could find with outside of that. So you can kind of approach things individually. You can also approach things from a global level. I was talking about the work that I did on Hyperlight Drifter, and one of the things that I used a lot on Hyperlight Drifter was this plugin Satin, which is a tape machine. It's just a quick way to warm things up and kind of bring in some noise, some intelligent noise. One of the things that this plugin does that's really cool is it has this asperity feature. So what this does is it just kind of adds a little bit of noise, like with the dynamics of the music, which I find is pretty cool. Definitely used it at different times. And add a little bit of like crosstalk, which is sort of like this effect kind of carrying the two channels across each other. A little bit of wow, which is sort of this like pitch, this little funky pitch modulation. You can already hear that just adds a little bit of just warmth to the sounds, which can go, it can do a lot. And then like, I would say experimenting with the timbre of the sounds a little bit in different ways can be really fun. One that I quite like is using resonators. You can kind of change the way that something sounds, or maybe make it sound like it's coming from some sort of strange chamber or something. All of these kind of things like can definitely help. This one's a little chunky though. Takes a lot of performance out of my computer. So maybe not that one for today. Let's see. So I was talking about I was talking about active automation and modulation. There's passive, where you're setting knobs in the synthesizer, using LFOs, and they're just kind of going. They're kind of doing what they do. But you can also do active modulation within the synth, and a really great way to do that is to use macros. So I can create a little macro actually for this sound, for the melody, where as I crank this knob, it's going to affect the sound of it. So what we might want to do is like hook up some different properties to this knob so that we get a variety in the sound. So one thing I'm going to do is I'll hook up the ring modulation to this macro. This one's pretty subtle, so maybe we'll try. That one has a pretty significant effect, so we could throw that one on too. Maybe position. Just sort of taking the kitchen sink approach since we have limited time. Throw this one on too. You can see as I call that oomph. As you see as we crank this, we're getting a different sort of effect. Maybe you throw in some very subtle size changes as you do this, so that it just adds a little bit of funky weirdness. Maybe some more reverb. You can see that this gets a little quieter because I'm cranking the reverb when the oomph is all the way up. So maybe I want to boost the sound just a little bit. We're not using this filter. Sometimes you have to. Well, when I do this, I'll bring this back to normal and I'll turn this up the volume, and then I'll actually what I'll do is I will put this back. Maybe I'll bring this amp down a little bit for the sound, and then I'll crank it a little bit with the knob. So you can hear now it's a little more consistent. And this is really fun. I've done a lot of work this way, just basically going from A to B, and then through the course of a song, you might even just be like slowly dragging this knob across and just getting lots of variety in the sound. So let's add some more fun stuff. Let's add a delay, maybe. Let's try it. Sometimes I do it. Sometimes I listen while I'm doing it. Sometimes I don't. And that's half the fun. These are running counter to each other. So when this is all the way off, they're going to be like this. It's going to be fully wet and very short time. And then as this goes all the way up, we're going to get more and more dry with longer and longer delay. So let's see what that sounds like. It might be slightly too crazy, but it's also kind of cool. Let's give it a shot. There's definitely, you can perform modulation, automation. I mean, sometimes though, I like to just pop it in and see what happens. Oops. So let's do that. I think I'll make these lower too. Make this a little more intense. Oops, we could also make these a little louder. Play with this too a little bit, maybe the time is variable. Yeah. So let's do the same thing for the accompaniment too. And you can really see how very quickly you can get very dynamic changes from a synth by just setting up some different kind of sort of like almost like presets, but I would call them like stages. So we have, the kind of the basic. we have the basic sound for this kind of accompaniment pad, keyboard kind of sound. We can do the same thing that we did for the other one. Make a oomph, like a bit of an oomph macro, and then just kind of dial in some changes that we think might suit this. So I might, I might increase the density, maybe get a little brighter. That's what this color knob does. Maybe add a little bit of noise. That could be good. Just a little bit, maybe. Let's see. Okay, we definitely need some more stuff. Let's see. We can try these again. Yeah. A little bit of that. That one's not really doing a whole lot on this one. Let's see. It's pretty gnarly. Try that one. So that's off, and then this is on. It's a bit much, maybe. Maybe pull that back a little. We could also maybe we'll dial in another oscillator over time. Maybe this is let's see, maybe a sine wave. Maybe down an octave. It's pretty dramatic. Let's see. Maybe the oomph brings the reverb down this time instead of up. Okay, that's pretty cool. And for this one, maybe we'll try instead of just a straight line, we could try maybe something a little more flowing. Just see where that gets us. Maybe even like that. Let's see what that sounds like. So yeah, it's interesting. I think, it's definitely not always going to come out exactly the way that you wanted to or expected to. And so when you're trying to dial in something specific, this isn't always going to work out, but it's a great way to just start to build some sort of interest into a synth sound. Just really start kind of getting in there, dialing in lots of knobs, twiddling with stuff, using macros to change things over time, cross modulation, using randomization. All these sort of things tend to work together really well to just start to bring liveliness to a synth sound. And I've used these sort of techniques for a long time to create lots of different kinds of sounds. I think most importantly, it's really fun to just sort of experiment and see what you can come up with. So yeah, that's basically the gist of what I wanted to share today. It does. I don't know if we had set up a question and answer period, but I'd be happy to answer some questions if anyone had any questions.
So if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the laptop. But if you don't have any questions, it's all good. No, not yet.
Okay. So no question. Oh, here we go. Here's a question. What has been your favorite project that you've made music for? It's a really hard question to answer because every project is so different. I think about a project like Fez, which was really fun, and it was nice to just the music process was nice because it was very, in a way, it was very straightforward. I got to write music with very few instruments, and it was really my first time implementing music in a game, and that was a really fun process, just learning what that was about and experimenting with how to do that. There have also been projects like Mini Metro, which was my first commercial project that I worked on, where I got to do a bunch of coding and really create a just a generative audio system, just completely in code. That was a really cool experience, and just I learned so much on that project. So that's definitely a favorite of mine. Um, yeah, there's it's hard to pick, but there have definitely been a few that I really enjoyed. Um, what has been your biggest obstacle, whether in your music career or just in general? Biggest obstacle, I think. I think because one of the big ones for me doing music and being a freelancer is just figuring out my own schedule and like you're essentially in charge of your own career, so it takes a lot to figure out you know how to prioritize your time and what to focus on, what not to focus on, figuring out your boundaries around work and work life balance type stuff. Like for a long time, I just worked out of my bedroom, and it took me a little bit of time to figure out that that wasn't the best. It wasn't always the best for me, and it made it hard to separate kind of my time away from work and my time working. And so, at some point, I figured out, oh, I at the very least I need like a separate room that I can go to do my work, so that I am not just working at all hours. And so like creating those boundaries and stuff is took a long time, but it's I think very important for someone who does the kind of work that I do. What synthesizer software would you recommend getting started out with? Really, I don't think it matters a whole lot. I mean, for me, Massive was great as one of the first synthesizers that I really kind of sunk my teeth into. I mean, definitely a synthesizer that I highly recommend, but there are a lot of great synthesizers. There's a lot of great DAWs. I really think it's a matter of personal preference. Fortunately, a lot of these pieces of software you can demo and get a chance to check it out and see whether you like it or not. And I would go towards the one that you feel comfortable with, and that you enjoy using. And I can also say that when you've been using the same thing for a really long time, sometimes it's hard to switch. So, uh, but if you like it and you can get it to do what you want to do, then that's going to be hopefully that get you pretty far. Um, so I've been using Logic Pro pretty much since I was in college. So the last 10 plus years, and I sometimes I think about switching to Ableton or something like that, but it would take a long time for me to get up to the level of like proficiency that I have in Ableton that I do in Logic. So those are the sort of things that I guess you come up across. So
Because like it did sound pretty cool.